Personal Story segment tonight. Speaking before the American Islamic College Conference in Chicago over the weekend, Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois apologized to Muslim Americans.
Forms of discrimination come in many forms, many shapes, and in many guises. You have my pledge to work with you to fight them, and I think it's appropriate for you to apologize on behalf of this country for the discrimination you have faced.
Wow. The question, what discrimination? Mr. Quigley, unavailable this evening, but joining us now from Chicago, Ahmed Rehab, Executive Director of CAIR-Chicago. He was at the event on Saturday. So, look, I don't want to be a wise guy here. After 9/11, there were Americans who looked askance at anybody who was a Muslim. Okay. But the stats don't back up Mr. Quigley's assertion that there is an institutional bias against Muslim Americans. There's simply no statistics, none, that demonstrate that. Am I wrong?
You're wrong in several ways. First of all, I think one would have to be living under a rock, with all due respect, not to notice the uptick that we're seeing in this country in terms of both Islamophobic remarks from people in power, not just people on the street, but people who are elected to represent Americans in government.
Do you want to cite an example?
Well, yeah. I mean, one example is pretty much everything that comes out of the mouth of Representative Allen West. And when your producer called me to be on the show, I was rather surprised that it was to react to someone, expressing sympathy against Islamophobia rather than to talk about the crazy, cookish stuff another representative says day in, day out about Muslims. And
all right, but
that to me
did West say anything
show
that you can quote to us? Because I'm not real familiar with what...
Only that Islam is the enemy and that Islam is not a religion.
Okay,
that,
you may remember...
If Islam is the enemy, then Muslims are the enemy.
You may remember, Mr. Rehab, that I said on The View that Muslims attacked us on 9/11, all right? And then that caused all kinds of controversy as Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg walked off the set. Now, at the time, I was kind of surprised because I feel that everybody knows that I was referring to jihadists and extremists and al-Qaeda, but they were all Muslim, 100%. But I don't consider myself anti-Muslim. I've been to many Muslim countries, always enjoyed myself there, admire the culture. I'm not anti-Muslim, but I guess you would think that I would be.
Actually, Bill, this may surprise you, but I don't. I've heard your positions. I disagree with many of them, but I don't regard you as an anti-Muslim individual.
Okay, well,
however, there are people, unfortunately, there are people in government, even in Congress. I mean, people like Michelle Bachmann, Newt Gingrich in the past. We have now Representative Allen West, Peter King, that have made statements that would reasonably make them anti-Muslim.
Well, look,
and there are stats, contrary to what you said in the introduction,
I'm not sure about that, though. Look, I'll grant you this, that maybe those people have said things that you don't agree with and you don't like, and you took personally. But I know all three of those individuals, and I don't think they're anti-Muslim, just me. Now, the stats from the FBI are interesting. This is hate crimes. Anti-Islamic hate crimes in 2009, last stats available, 107, compared to anti-black hate crimes, 2,284, anti-Jewish, 931. So it seems that Jewish Americans have much more of a beef than Muslim Americans, do they not?
Yeah, there are many confounding factors. Jews have been in this country longer as a community, and they've learned to deal with anti-Semitism more systematically by reporting it. In our case, there are many immigrants who comprise the American Muslim community who are afraid to speak out against the hatred or bigotry or discrimination.
But how would you know that there are those crimes if they're afraid to speak out? How would you know that there are those crimes then? I'm not saying there aren't. You might be right, but you couldn't know.
Well, there are different things we look at. We've had thousands of cases of discrimination that we've dealt with within our own organization alone about employment discrimination. Actually, the EEOC has reported that the complaints they've received about anti-Muslim discrimination in the workplace has been on the rise 5 years in a row. And when you look on the other side, you look at stats and polls that come out of, for example, USA Today Gallup poll that reports that 39% of Americans said they favored requiring Muslims, including American citizens, to carry special identification. A Time poll showed that 1/3 of Americans believed that Muslims should be barred from running for president of the United States, American citizens who otherwise would qualify.
All right, Mr. Rehab, those stats bolster your argument, but I will point to the fact that in the economic realm, Muslim Americans doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. So, you know,
I would live in America more than anywhere else.
Yeah, they're prospering. They're prospering
in
America.
Okay. But we have an issue, and we need to deal with this issue, one that is called Islamophobia.
And that's why we have you on a program, that people can make up their own mind, and we don't want anybody to be anti-Muslim. Thank you for coming on here. Plenty more ahead as the factor moves along.